Welcome to the Explainer. You know, if you look around today, the act of being watched has almost entirely lost its physical form. We don't really see those trench-coated detectives lingering under dimly lit street lamps anymore, right? Instead, modern surveillance is this invisible atmospheric presence, just quietly living in the constant exchange of digital data packets. Today, we're going to examine how this mass surveillance wasn't just born overnight, but actually evolved steadily over centuries. Now, it's super tempting to view our electronic dragnet as a sudden anomaly, like it's just some panic-driven consequence of the digital age and a post-9/11 world. But to truly understand the invisible digital net surrounding us today, we really have to trace its roots back through a fascinating history of shrinking mediums and expanding power. Tracing this evolution, a really clear trend starts to pop out. Surveillance continuously dematerializes. It started as physical architecture back in 1791, moved into copper wires in the 1860s, completely evaporated into radio waves in the 20th century, and finally dissolved into the digital data packets we know today. All right, let's jump into Section 1, the architecture of suspicion, from brick to paper files. We're heading back to the late 18th century, where the whole philosophy of surveillance was first formalized in physical space and state bureaucracy. Picture this. In 1791, philosopher Jeremy Bentham designed a conceptual prison he called the Panopticon. It featured a circular ring of cells totally illuminated by light, with a darkened inspection tower directly in the center. The genius, and the terrifying part, is that the inmates couldn't see into the tower. They never knew exactly when they were being watched. And this brilliantly illustrates philosopher Michel Foucault's later insight: the true power of surveillance is purely psychological. It's all about getting people to internalize the gaze of authority and police their own behavior simply because they might be watched. Meanwhile, at exactly the same time in France, Napoleon's Minister of Police, Joseph Fouché, proved that you don't even need a physical tower to watch people. If you build a massive, systematic registry of paper files, fed by a huge network of informants, you can monitor an entire society. Fouché literally traded physical violence for information. His system of registry cards and domestic watch lists created the operational blueprint for the modern intelligence agency. It was just limited by the physical speed of paper delivery. Moving right along to Section 2, Whispers on the Wire. This is the birth of electronic spying, where communication shatters geographic boundaries by moving to copper wires in the 19th century. With the invention of the electric telegraph, thoughts could suddenly travel at the speed of light. But, well, that meant they could also be intercepted. During the American Civil War, military telegraph operators became the world's very first electronic spies. Known as milkmen, these operators spliced into active enemy telegraph lines using portable pocket relays. And they didn't just passively listen. They actively injected fraudulent Morse signals to divert supply trains or lead enemies into ambushes. This inaugurated an escalating, permanent arms race of code-making and code-breaking that would completely define the next century. By the 1920s, wiretapping transitioned to domestic policing, sparking some massive legal friction. In the landmark 1928 case, Olmstead v. United States, Chief Justice Taft ruled that tapping a bootlegger's phone was totally legal. He relied on this outdated view that without actual physical trespass onto property, there was no crime. But Justice Louis Brandeis issued an absolutely prophetic dissent. He warned that technology would eventually allow the government to explore our most intimate thoughts, fiercely defending what he called our right to be let alone. Which brings us to Section 3, the Cold War shadows, SIGINT, and total reach. We leap into the turbulent 20th century, where communications evaporate into radio waves, demanding surveillance on a globally industrialized scale. Driven by the existential threats of the world wars, governments were essentially forced to build massive code-breaking operations. It started with Britain's Room 40 in World War I, moved to the American Black Chamber in the 1920s, and then escalated dramatically in World War II, thanks to mathematical geniuses like Alan Turing. This monumental, intense effort culminated in President Truman's 1952 creation of the highly secretive National Security Agency, or the NSA. But here is where the story shifts drastically. The NSA soon turned this immense technological power inward. Under Operations Shamrock and Minaret, private cable companies secretly surrendered millions of private messages directly to the government for 30 years, no questions asked. The NSA then illegally analyzed the telegrams and calls of American civil rights leaders like Martin Luther King Jr. and anti-war activists entirely without any judicial warrants. When these staggering domestic abuses were finally exposed in the 1970s, it sent shockwaves through the public. Senator Frank Church led investigations that uncovered the immense scale of this surveillance, and he issued a really chilling warning. Such technological capacity could enable total tyranny with literally no way to fight back. This terrifying realization prompted Congress to pass FISA, building a much-needed legal wall around our privacy. But spoiler alert, that legal wall wouldn't hold up forever. Section 4, the Silicon Panopticon and the birth of surveillance capitalism. As the Cold War ended and the internet arose, the primary engine of mass monitoring completely shifted from the state directly into the hands of the private market. In this digital era, analog safeguards became totally obsolete. Why? Because every single email, search, and click leaves a permanent, highly profitable digital footprint. Scholars Shoshana Zuboff coined the term surveillance capitalism to describe this new economic reality. It's a system where our very human experience is harvested as free raw material, analyzed, and then sold to advertisers as predictions about our future behavior. So how does this model actually work in practice? Well, take Google in its early days. They realized that the waste data generated from user searches, like exactly what time you search or what specific links you click, possessed immense predictive value. It was like finding oil in the digital trash can. They captured that human experience, extracted the behavioral surplus using machine learning, created prediction products, and realized massive profit through targeted advertising. Boom, an entirely new pipeline for monetizing human behavior was established. To maximize these profits, corporations built an expansive consumer tracking network. They deployed cookies to follow you everywhere across the web. They created social media algorithms specifically designed to keep you hooked and extract deep psychological data. And let's be real, you are likely holding the ultimate tracking device right now, your smartphone. Introduced in 2007, it packed a GPS, microphone, and camera into a pocket-sized device. We willingly traded our privacy for convenience, essentially paying out of pocket for our own surveillance tools. And that commercial infrastructure sets the perfect stage for our final era. Section 5, the post-9/11 total dragnet, the unholy alliance. This era was inaugurated by the tragic events of September 11, 2001, an intelligence failure that drove the government to adopt a brand new philosophy: lower the legal firewalls and just collect all the dots. The public was largely unaware of how deeply the state had tapped into these commercial data pipelines until 2013. That's when Edward Snowden exposed the terrifying scale of this state corporate alliance. He revealed programs like Section 215, which systematically collected millions of ordinary American phone records, PRISM, which gave the NSA direct access to tech giant servers, and Upstream, which literally involved splicing directly into the physical undersea fiber optic cables of the internet. The government bypassed traditional warrants entirely to vacuum up massive quantities of our global digital communications. Today, this whole apparatus has evolved into what we call the algorithmic panopticon. Because the sheer volume of data is just impossible for any human to process, automated algorithms now stand squarely in the center of the watchtower. Artificial intelligence constantly parses a global torrent of data for real-time facial recognition, predictive policing, and mapping our risks, vulnerabilities, and exact locations 24 hours a day. So, synthesizing this entire journey, a rather stark reality emerges. Over 3 centuries, the medium of surveillance has continually shrunk, from physical brick spaces and paper files, all the way down to invisible digital packets and global networks. Simultaneously, the watcher has expanded, growing from a bureaucratic state into a ubiquitous joint-state corporate apparatus powered by artificial intelligence. We've literally gone from the paper files of Paris to fiber optic AI mapping the entire globe. Which brings us to our ultimate question. As the boundary of our human autonomy shrinks under this total visibility, what exactly happens next? The greatest threat isn't just losing our secrets, it's the actual erosion of our private selves. The challenge going forward is whether we can consciously rewrite our social and legal contracts with these technologies. Can we reclaim Justice Brandeis's right to be let alone in the digital age before the unblinking eye sees absolutely everything? That is what we must decide.
Please like and subscribe.